You need to leave this house. Tonight. And you take whatever secret you are hiding and you never come back. He said it without raising his voice. That was the worst part. Dominic Castellano never had to raise his voice to make someone understand they were in danger. Sophia stood in the middle of his bedroom, a folded towel pressed against her chest, her heart slamming so hard she could feel it in her throat. He was staring at her not with anger, with something colder. Recognition, like he had just solved a problem he hadn't known he was working on. And the problem was her. The problem was what she was carrying. The problem was the secret she had spent 4 months trying to bury in this house. She hadn't buried it deep enough. If this story already has your blood running cold, subscribe right now and follow every single part to the end, because I promise you it only gets more intense from here. Drop a comment and tell me what city you're watching from. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. The day Sophia Reyes found out she was 4 months pregnant, she was standing in the east wing of Castellano Manor with a mop in her hand in a secret that was about to destroy everything. She hadn't planned to take the test at work. She had carried it in her jacket pocket for 11 days sealed unopened, because some part of her brain had decided that as long as the packaging stayed intact, the answer wasn't real. But that morning, her body had made the decision for her. The nausea had hit so suddenly, so violently, that she'd barely made it to the East Wing bathroom before her knees hit the tile. Afterwards, sitting on the cold floor with her back against the wall, she'd ripped the packaging open with shaking fingers. 2 lines. She sat with that for 3 full minutes. Then she wrapped the test in a paper towel, shoved it to the bottom of the trash, stood up, flushed the toilet, and went back to work. That was who Sophia Reyes was. She went back to work. She was 28 minutes into cleaning the East Wing corridor when she heard Marta's heels on the marble. "There you are." Marta appeared around the corner, reading glasses pushed up on her forehead, tablet in hand. "Mr. Castellano wants the conference room done before noon. He has a meeting." "I'll get there," Sophia said. "Sophia," Marta's voice dropped half a register. "The conference room before noon." "I heard you the first time." Marta stopped walking. She studied Sophia the way she'd been studying her for the past 2 weeks, with that particular kind of attention that older women gave younger ones when they suspected something was being hidden. "You've been pale all month." "I don't sleep well." "You need to eat." "I eat fine." "You threw up this morning." Sophia's hand tightened on the mop handle. "I had bad coffee." "The coffee in this house costs $40 a bag." "Then it was very expensive, bad coffee." Sophia met her eyes. "I'm fine, Marta. Conference room by noon, I've got it." Marta held her gaze for one long measuring moment. Then she turned and walked back the way she came. But at the corner she stopped. Didn't look back, just said quietly, "Whatever it is, girl, be careful." Sophia didn't answer. She pushed the mop forward and kept moving, and told herself Marta meant nothing by it, that it was just a general warning, the kind an older woman gave to a younger one in a house like this. She told herself that for exactly 4 minutes. Then the East Wing door at the far end of the corridor swung open, and Dominic Castellano walked through it. He wasn't supposed to be here. His calendar, she'd overheard Marta reading it to someone that morning, had him off-site until 11. It was 8:40. He was early by 2 hours, and he was walking toward her with the focused, unhurried stride of a man who owned every surface he stepped on, and there was nowhere for Sophia to go. She kept her head down, kept the mop moving. Professional. Invisible. "You are furniture. You are a lamp." He was on the phone. He passed within 4 feet of her without breaking his stride. She could feel the moment his eyes moved over her, a brief, sweeping assessment, the way he looked at everything in his house, and then he was past her, and she was breathing again. And then he stopped. She heard it, the pause in his footsteps, the silence where the footsteps should have continued. "Hold on," he said into the phone, to whoever was on the other end. Then over his shoulder, "Sophia." She looked up. "Mr. Castellano." "When did you get here?" 7:30. "Keep it simple. Don't offer anything extra." "Marta has me on the East Wing today." He turned around fully. The phone was still in his hand, but he wasn't looking at it anymore. He was looking at her specifically, carefully, in the way that had been making her nervous for weeks. "You're doing the whole wing?" "Yes, sir." "That'll take until mid-afternoon." "I'll be done by 2. He tilted his head slightly. "Just a fraction." "Have you eaten this morning?" Sophia blinked. Yes. What did you eat? I'm sorry. What did you have for breakfast? Not a question, an actual inquiry asked with calm, direct attention the way he asked everything. She stared at him. She could not for the life of her figure out why Dominic Castellano cared what she'd eaten for breakfast. Toast, she said, and coffee. That's not enough. Mr. Castellano, I'll have the kitchen send something to the staff room. He turned back to his phone, already raising it back to his ear. Take a break at 9:30. Eat something. He walked away. The call resumed. Sophia stood in the middle of the corridor with her mop and her nausea and the quiet, creeping dread of a woman who understood suddenly and with terrible clarity that this man had been watching her more closely than she'd realized. Toast and coffee. He'd known she hadn't eaten enough. How did he know that? How long had he been watching her face closely enough to notice the difference between a woman who was tired and a woman who was sick? She grabbed her cart and pushed it toward the conference room and tried very hard not to think about what that meant. The conference room was large. A long table, 12 chairs, a credenza along one wall, a projector mounted to the ceiling. On the table left from a previous meeting were 2 water glasses, a yellow legal pad covered in handwriting, and a single photograph lying face down. Sophia was a professional. She cleared the glasses, stacked them on her cart. She did not look at the legal pad. She picked up the photograph to move it to the credenza and turned it over without thinking. Because that was just what you did with photographs. You turn them to check for damage before you move them. It was a photograph of a woman, young, maybe mid-20s, dark hair, eyes that were sharp and familiar in a way Sophia couldn't place. She was standing in front of a building that looked institutional, maybe a hospital, maybe something else, and she was looking at the camera like she wished she wasn't being photographed. Sophia turned it face down and placed it on the credenza. It meant nothing. People had photographs. This was not her business. She was wiping down the table when the door opened. It was not Dominic this time. It was the man from the hallway, the one from the dinner 3 weeks ago, the one with the wide smile and the eyes that saw too much. He stepped into the conference room and stopped when he saw her, and his smile spread slowly. Well, he said, the cleaner. I'm almost done, Sophia said. I'll be out in a few minutes. No rush. He walked to the credenza, picked up the photograph she'd placed there, and tucked it into his jacket pocket without looking at it. Then he looked at her. You've been here a while now, haven't you? On the regular rotation, about 3 months. He pulled out a chair and sat down uninvited like a man who never waited for invitations. And how do you find it? Working in a house like this? It's a job, Sophia said. Everything's a job to somebody. He leaned back in the chair. You're from Texas, right, San Antonio? Sophia's hands stopped moving on the table. I don't think we've been introduced. We haven't, he said pleasantly. I'm Marco. I know things about people. It's a habit. He paused. You look tired, you know. You should take better care of yourself. You should take better care of yourself. The same words essentially that Dominic had said, but in Marco's mouth they felt different. They felt like a statement about information. Like a reminder that he knew things, like a door being held open with a smile. I'll keep that in mind, Sophia said. She began loading the last items onto her cart. Sophia, his voice shifted, just slightly, just enough to make her stop. How long have you known? She turned around slowly. Known what? He was watching her with the expression of a man who was very much enjoying a game he'd already won. That this house isn't what it looks like. He spread his hands. Just a friendly question. From someone who's known Dominic Castellano for 15 years. I clean the rooms, Sophia said. That's all I know. Marco smiled, wider this time. Of course, he stood straightening his jacket. Eat something today, will you? You really do look pale. And he walked out. Sophia stood in the empty conference room for 11 seconds. Then she picked up her cart and walked directly to the nearest staff bathroom and sat on the closed toilet lid with her face in her hands. Marco knew her name, her full name, her hometown. He'd had that information without ever being introduced to her, which meant someone had told him or he'd found it himself. And the way he'd looked at her, that specific knowing you're not as invisible as you think. Look, she pressed her palms flat against her thighs. Think clearly. 2 men in this house had looked at her in the last 30 minutes as though she was a question they were close to answering. One of them was the father of her child. The other one frightened her in a way she didn't have a word for yet. She had thought she had time. She had thought she could manage this quietly, carefully, keep working, save money, disappear before she started to show. She had thought 4 months was still early enough to have a plan. She was beginning to understand she had already run out of time. At 9:30, exactly as instructed, she went to the staff room. On the table was a plate, scrambled eggs, toast, sliced fruit, a glass of orange juice. No one else was there. No note. Just food warm, waiting. Sophia stood in the doorway and looked at that plate for a long moment. Then she sat down and ate every bite because she was hungry and she was 4 months pregnant and her body needed it and she was not going to stand on principle when her baby needed calories. She hated that it tasted this good. She hated that eating it felt against every instinct she had, like being cared for. She was rinsing her plate at the sink when she heard the footsteps in the hallway outside, 2 sets moving fast, and then Dominic's voice and Marco's, and she stood very still with the water running so they wouldn't hear her. She's sharper than she looks, Marco's voice, easy conversational. She didn't react when I mentioned Texas. You talked to her, Dominic's voice, flat. A statement, not a question, and something in it that was not quite anger but was close. I was in the conference room. She was cleaning. It was a brief conversation. I told you to stay away from the staff. I was making an observation. Make your observation somewhere else. A pause. What did she say? Nothing incriminating. She's careful. Another pause, and then Marco's voice turned lighter, more amused. She's very careful, Dominic. More careful than a cleaning woman needs to be. Silence. Long enough that Sophia's fingers went cold under the running water. Then Dominic said very quietly, I know. 2 words. And the weight in them, the certainty, the something already decided quality of them, hit Sophia like a physical blow. I know. He knew she was hiding something. He didn't know what, not yet. But he knew, and now he was going to find out. The footsteps moved away down the corridor. Sophia turned off the faucet. She dried her hands slowly, methodically, the way she'd been taught to do everything in this house, quietly and visibly, without a single unnecessary movement. Then she took out her phone and texted Carmen. 3 words, I need help. Carmen called back in 40 seconds. What happened? They're watching me, Sophia said, keeping her voice barely above a whisper. Marco, the man I told you about, he already knew my name, my hometown. He asked me how long I'd known, and I don't... Known what? That's the thing, I don't know exactly, but Carmen Dominic, she stopped, started again. He said I know, like he's already figured out I'm hiding something. He just doesn't know what yet. Then you quit, today. You walk out and you don't go back. I can't just walk out. Why not? Because walking out suddenly is exactly what someone does when they're running from something. If I disappear today, it confirms I'm hiding something. She pressed her back against the staff room wall. I have to stay. I have to be calm. I have to give them nothing. Sophia, 2 more weeks, she said. I just need 2 more weeks and I'll have enough saved to cover 3 months of mom's bills and I can take a different position, something with a different agency. 2 weeks is a long time when someone is actively looking at you. I know. She closed her eyes. I know. Carmen was quiet for a moment, then, you're going to tell me that the reason you won't just quit and disappear is partly because of the money. Yes, and partly because of something else. Sophia didn't answer. Sophia, I have to go, Sophia said. My break's almost over. We're going to talk about this later. I know. She hung up. She straightened her uniform. She picked up her cart from the hallway. She went back to work. At 11:58, 2 minutes before the noon deadline, she finished the conference room. Clean, smooth, every surface done. She was rolling her cart back toward the East Wing service corridor when the door at the far end opened and Dominic walked through it alone, this time no phone, no Marco. He looked at the conference room, then at her, then at the conference room again. 2 minutes to spare, he said. I said I'd be done by noon. He nodded once, and then as she moved to pass him, he said, the test. Everything in Sophia's body stopped. The cart, her feet, her lungs. I'm sorry, her voice came out completely even. She didn't know how. She didn't know where that steadiness came from. Pregnancy test. He said it the same way he said everything, flat, direct, without drama. The one in the East Wing bathroom trash this morning. His eyes met hers. I'm the one who unlocked that wing, Sophia. I check it at the start of every day. The corridor was very quiet. It was in the trash, she said finally. Yes, he said. It was. That could have been anyone's. No one else has been in the East Wing since last Thursday. He didn't move, didn't raise his voice. I'm not asking you to confirm anything you're not ready to say. I'm telling you what I found. Because I think, he paused. Something moved through his eyes that she couldn't name. I think you deserve to know that I found it. Sophia looked at him. This man, this dangerous, careful, impossible man who had sent her breakfast and told Marco to stay away from her and was now standing in a hallway telling her gently that her secret was already gone. What are you going to do? She asked. That, he said, depends entirely on what you tell me next. The silence stretched between them, long and enormous and full of everything that hadn't been said yet. Sophia felt the weight of the next words she was about to speak like a physical thing, like a door she was about to open that she would never be able to close again. She took a breath. Mr. Castellano. Dominic. She looked at him. I can't do this here. Then come to my office, he said, when you're ready. He turned and walked away and left her standing in the corridor with her cart and her secret and the absolute devastating certainty that, ready or not, the truth was already in the room. Sophia stood outside Dominic's office door for 4 full minutes without knocking. She counted. Not because she was trying to be dramatic, but because her brain had gone into a kind of strange mechanical precision, counting seconds the way you counted breaths when you were trying not to drown. 4 minutes. 240 seconds. Long enough for her to talk herself into going in, talk herself back out, and then arrive at the cold, simple conclusion that there was no version of this where she walked away unchanged. She knocked. Come in. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. Dominic was behind his desk, jacket off a pen in his hand, that he set down the moment she entered. He didn't stand. He just looked at her with that same direct, unhurried attention. The look that she was beginning to understand was not coldness. It was something else entirely. Something she didn't have a name for yet. Close the door, he said. She closed it. She did not sit down because sitting down felt like surrender, and she needed to hold on to every small thing she still controlled. You found the test, she said. No point circling it. Yes. And you waited all day to say something. I waited until you'd eaten something, he said, and until Marco was off the property. That landed. She looked at him. Why does Marco matter? Because what happens in this conversation is between us. His voice was even. Not him, not anyone else. Us. Sophia pressed her back lightly against the door. That test doesn't tell you anything except that someone is pregnant. It doesn't tell you who. It doesn't tell you. Sophia. He said her name the way he always said it, not cutting her off, just placing a weight on it. I'm not asking you to explain the test. I'm asking you to tell me the truth. Whatever it is. He paused. I can handle the truth. What I cannot handle is being lied to in my own house. The silence stretched. Sophia looked at the floor, then at him, then at the floor again, and then she did something she had not planned to do, had not given herself permission to do. She told him, I'm 4 months pregnant, she said, and it's yours. Dominic Castellano did not move. Not a muscle, not a breath. He sat behind that desk and absorbed those 9 words like a man absorbing a physical blow with complete controlled stillness that had cost him something even if you couldn't see the price being paid on his face. Then he said, 4 months. Yes. That night in the library. Yes. Another silence. Longer this time. Heavy enough to press on her chest. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Because I didn't want you to know. She said it directly. No apology in it. Because I don't know what you do in this house, Mr. Castellano, but I know enough to know it isn't ordinary. And I didn't want any part of it near my child. His jaw tightened, just slightly. Your child. Yes, my child. Our child. That's not... She stopped, steadied herself. I'm not here to negotiate custody. I'm here because you found the test and you asked me to tell you the truth, and I have. Now I'd like to know what you're going to do. Dominic was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood slowly, deliberately, and walked around the desk and stopped about 5 feet from her, not close enough to crowd her, far enough that she could breathe. What I'm going to do, he said, is make sure you're safe, both of you. I'm not asking if you need it. Still that same voice, still that same absolute infuriating calm. I'm telling you what's going to happen. You don't get to tell me what's going to happen with my pregnancy. No, he agreed. I don't. What happens with the pregnancy is yours. Where you go, who you tell, what decisions you make yours. He met her eyes. But your safety, while you're carrying my child, that's mine. Sophia stared at him. She had prepared herself for anger. She had prepared herself for denial, for coldness, for the kind of calculated distance powerful men used when they wanted a problem to go away quietly. She had not prepared herself for this, for him to look at her like she was something he was going to protect even if she didn't want him to. It terrified her more than anger would have. I need to think, she said. Take all the time you need. I need to leave tonight. I need to go home and think. I know. He stepped back, giving her the door. But Sophia, she paused, hand on the knob. Don't disappear. Don't quit without telling me. If you decide you want nothing to do with me, I'll respect that. But I need to know you're somewhere I can reach you. That's all I'm asking. She didn't answer. She opened the door and walked out, and she kept walking until she was in her car, and then she sat in the Castellano Manor driveway for 3 minutes, with her hands on the steering wheel, staring at nothing, and tried to figure out how everything had changed so completely in the span of 20 minutes. She drove home. She called Carmen before she even got inside. He knows, she said the moment Carmen picked up. A beat of silence. He found out, or you told him? Both. He found the test, and then Carmen, I just told him. I don't know why I had planned to deny everything, and because you're exhausted from carrying it alone, Carmen said quietly. Because 4 months is a long time to carry something that heavy by yourself. Sophia sat on the edge of her bed and pressed her free hand flat against her stomach. He said he wants to keep me safe. Don't say it sounds good. I wasn't going to say good, I was going to say complicated. It is complicated. She lay back, looked at the ceiling. He said what happens with the pregnancy is my choice. He said he'd respect whatever I decided. And I don't know if I believe him, but Carmen, the way he said it, she stopped. I'm scared of how much I almost believed him. Carmen was quiet for a moment. Then, what are you going to do tomorrow? I don't know, Sophia said. I genuinely don't know. She found out the answer the next morning when she arrived at Castellano Manor for her Friday shift, and Marta met her at the service entrance with an expression that had moved past concern and arrived at something that looked a lot like fear. You've been reassigned, Marta said. Sophia stopped walking. I'm sorry. Mr. Castellano called this morning. You're off the cleaning rotation, effective immediately. Marta's voice was low controlled. He wants to see you in the East Wing office at 8. He fired me? He didn't say fired. Marta hesitated. He said reassigned. What does that mean? I don't know, Marta said. And the fact that Marta didn't know Marta, who had worked in this house for 11 years and knew every current and undercurrent in it, made something tighten in Sophia's chest. She went to the East Wing office at 8. She knocked. Dominic opened the door himself, which meant Marco wasn't there, which meant whatever this was, he deliberately made it private. Sit down, he said. I'd rather stand. He didn't push it. He sat on the edge of his desk instead and looked at her and said, I have a proposal. A proposal, she repeated. A position in my charitable foundation. Administrative coordinator. It's an actual job, actual salary, office hours. No cleaning carts. He held her gaze. Better pay, health insurance, which given the circumstances you're going to need. Sophia looked at him for a long, careful moment. And in exchange for this position, nothing. He said it simply. No exchange. You need a better job. I need someone I trust in that office. Both things are true at the same time. You don't trust me. You don't know me. I know you kept a secret in this house for 4 months, he said, without a single crack until I found the test myself. In my world, that kind of discipline is worth more than a reference letter. Something shifted in his expression. And I know you came into my office yesterday and told me the truth when you could have kept lying. That matters to me. Sophia crossed her arms. This is charity. This is a job offer. It's a job offer designed to keep me close so you can monitor you. He raised an eyebrow. Sophia, if I wanted to monitor you, I'd have done it already. I've had your home address, your employment history, and your mother's name in San Antonio since the day you were hired. He paused, letting that settle. I'm not telling you that to frighten you. I'm telling you so you understand if control was what I wanted, I wouldn't need to offer you a job. I'd just use what I already have. The room was very quiet. That's not reassuring, she said finally. No, he agreed, but it's honest. She stood there and weighed at the salary, the insurance, the impossible, complicated reality of being tied more closely to this man's world instead of less. She thought about her mother's medical bills. She thought about the prenatal appointments she'd been putting off because of cost. She thought about the fact that in 5 months she would be visibly, undeniably pregnant and would need stable income, and she had exactly none of that right now. I need the weekend to think about it, she said. Take it. And if I say no, then you say no, he said, and I'll still make sure the insurance is covered. Don't argue with me about that part. It's not negotiable. Sophia looked at him, long enough to see that he meant it, long enough to understand that this man operated in a world where he made decisions and then simply executed them without waiting for permission, and somehow this particular decision had landed with all its weight on her side of the scale. Why, she asked. Why what? Why does it matter to you you don't know me? We spent one evening together. You could write a check and make this go away and never think about it again. Something moved across his face, quiet but real. Because my father did exactly that, he said, twice. He didn't look away from her. I'm not my father. She left without answering. She drove home. She called Carmen, but this time she didn't know what to say when Carmen picked up, so she just said, he's not what I expected. Is that good or bad? I have absolutely no idea, Sophia said. She spent the weekend pacing her apartment, arguing with herself, making pro and con lists she then threw away because no list was going to resolve the fundamental problem. She was 4 months pregnant, alone broke, and the only person offering concrete help was the one person she'd sworn to keep out of her life. Monday morning, she called Marta. Tell Mr. Castellano I'll take the position, she said, on a trial basis, 30 days. I'll let him know, Marta said. And then after a pause, good. Sophia started at the foundation office that Wednesday. The offices were in a separate building, clean, professional. Nothing about them said Castellano Manor. Her supervisor, a woman named Dr. Patricia Ewan, was brisk and competent and seemed to have no interest in Sophia's personal life beyond whether her paperwork was filed correctly. For the first time in months, Sophia felt something that resembled normal. She was 3 days in when Marco walked through the office door. He was smiling the way he always seemed to be smiling, and he stopped when he saw her at the reception desk and let the smile do a slow, deliberate expansion. Well, he said, look who moved up in the world. Mr. Vasquez, she'd learned his last name from the staff directory. Can I help you? Just passing through, he came to the desk, rested both hands on the edge of it. How are you settling in? And fine, thank you. Dominic takes care of his people, always has. His eyes moved over her in that assessing way. You must have made quite an impression. I do good work, she said evenly. I'm sure you do. He leaned in slightly. Word of advice, Sophia and I give this freely as someone who has known Dominic Castellano longer than almost anyone alive. He paused. Don't confuse his protectiveness for safety. The things he protects tend to become things he owns. She held his gaze, did not flinch. Thank you for the advice, she said. Do you have an appointment? He smiled and one more time, the smile of a man depositing information and walking away to let it grow, and left. Sophia sat very still for a moment. Then she pulled up the foundation's appointment calendar and stared at it without reading it and told herself Marco was playing a game and she didn't have to play it back. But the words stayed with her. The things he protects tend to become things he owns. She was thinking about that still when her phone buzzed with an unknown number. She almost didn't pick up. She picked up. Is this Sophia Reyes? A woman's voice. Older, careful, not aggressive. Who's asking? My name is Elena Castellano, the voice said. I'm Dominic's mother, and I think it's time you and I had a conversation before he decides what the next chapter of your life looks like for you. Sophia's hand tightened on the phone so hard her knuckles went pale. How did you get this number, she asked. The same way my son gets everything he wants, dear. A pause. I taught him. Another pause. Longer. I know about the baby. I've known for 3 days. And there are things about this family, about what that child will be born into, that Dominic will not tell you, because he doesn't think you need to know. The voice dropped. I disagree. Meet me. Tomorrow. Alone. Tell no one, not Dominic, not that friend you call every evening. A beat of silence. I know more about your situation than you realize, and I am possibly the only person in my son's world who is on your side. Sophia sat at her desk in the foundation office and stared at the wall in front of her and thought, this is how it starts. This is how people get pulled under. Someone offers them a hand and they take it, and they don't realize until much later that the hand was attached to something they never agreed to. How do I know you're telling the truth, she asked. You don't, Elena Castellano said. But ask yourself this, if Dominic is so safe, why has he not told you about the agreement? What agreement? Silence. Deliberate. Weaponized. Tomorrow, the woman said, come alone. And the line went dead. Sophia set the phone down on her desk. She looked at the calendar on her screen. She looked at the closed door of Dr. Ewing's office. She looked at her own hands flat on the desk, not shaking, not yet, but close. The agreement. She did not know what that meant. She did not know what Elena Castellano wanted, or what she knew, or whether anything she'd said was true. She knew only one thing with absolute certainty. The word agreement had been dropped into the conversation like a stone into still water. And the ripples were already moving, and there was no way to stop them now. She had walked into Dominic Castellano's world, thinking she could manage it quietly, keep her head down, protect her child, and walk away clean. She understood now, sitting in this office 3 weeks after she'd told him the truth, that she had never been walking away. She had been walking in. Every step she had thought he was careful had been a step further into something she hadn't been shown the full shape of yet. Her baby moved. Just barely a flutter the first time she'd felt it, clearly low and unmistakable. She pressed one hand to her stomach under the desk, and the movement came again, small and certain. She picked up her phone. She looked at the unknown number. She thought about calling Carmen. She thought about calling Dominic. She put the phone in her bag, stood up, and straightened her jacket. Tomorrow she decided she would meet Elena Castellano. She would listen. She would give nothing away. And she would find out what agreement meant before anyone in this family had another chance to decide what her life was going to look like. She was done being managed. She was done being positioned and observed and protected without consent. This baby was hers. And whatever came next, whatever the Castellano family had built around her, without asking, she was going to face it on her feet with her eyes open and on her own terms. Even if it killed her to do it that way. Even if part of her, the small, exhausted, frightened part that had eaten that plate of scrambled eggs and felt just for a moment like someone was watching out for her, even if that part of her was terrified of what she'd find. She picked up her bag and walked out of the office into the late afternoon and didn't look back. Elena Castellano was already seated when Sophia arrived. She had chosen a small cafe 3 miles from the foundation office, neutral ground. Public enough to feel safe, quiet enough that a conversation could stay private. Sophia had spent the entire drive there telling herself she was only going to listen, that she would give nothing away, that she was in control of this meeting. The moment she saw Elena, some of that certainty loosened. Dominic's mother was in her late 60s, silver-haired, dressed simply in a way that communicated old money so quietly it didn't need to announce itself. She was not what Sophia had pictured. She had expected someone harder, someone with the same controlled, impenetrable quality her son carried like a second skin. But Elena Castellano looked at her across the cafe with eyes that were tired in a very specific way, the way of a woman who had spent a long time watching people she loved walk toward things she couldn't stop. Sit down, Sophia, she said. You look like you're about to run. I'm still deciding, Sophia said, but she sat. Elena poured her a glass of water without being asked, pushed it across the table. How far along are you now? 4.5 months. And you're well the baby. We're both fine. Sophia wrapped both hands around the glass. You said there are things Dominic won't tell me. Start there. Elena studied her for a moment. Then she said, You're exactly what I hoped you'd be. I'm not here for compliments. What's the agreement? Elena set down her cup. 3 years ago, when Dominic was consolidating the Eastern Territory, you don't need to understand what that means exactly. Just understand that it was a negotiation between three very powerful men. He made a promise to a man named Victor Ruiz. In exchange for Ruiz's cooperation, Dominic agreed that any child born as his heir would be bound to a specific arrangement, a formal alliance to be negotiated when the child came of age. She paused. In plain language, his firstborn child was promised, not to a person, to a future deal. Sophia stared at her. That's not legal. That's not. No. Elena agreed. It is not legal. It is not enforceable in any court you could walk into. But in the world Dominic operates in, Sophia, legality is not the primary currency. She leaned forward. Victor Ruiz has known about your pregnancy for 2 weeks, longer than Dominic realized. And Ruiz is already moving on the assumption that this child is the heir Dominic promised him access to. The cafe noise continued around them, cups clinking, someone laughing at another table, and Sophia sat inside all of it feeling like the floor had tilted. Does Dominic know Ruiz is moving? She asked. He knows Ruiz knows. He doesn't know how far Ruiz has already gone. Elena's voice stayed even, but her hands folded on the table tightened slightly. There are people watching you, Sophia, not Dominic's people. Ruiz's. The man who sat near you on the bus last Thursday. The woman at the pharmacy counter last Saturday morning. They're cataloging your routine. Sophia's throat tightened. You're telling me I'm being surveilled. I'm telling you the surveillance started before Dominic offered you the job. He moved you into the foundation office partly to get you out of the manor where you were exposed and into a location he controls the security on. Elena paused. He is trying to protect you. I want you to believe that, but he is doing it without telling you why, and that is because he is my son, and he has spent his entire adult life deciding that protecting people means managing what they know. He doesn't think I can handle it. He doesn't think anyone can handle it. It's not personal. Something moved across her face. It's damage from a long time ago. Sophia absorbed that, set it aside for later. What do you want from me? She asked. Why are you here? You could have stayed out of this. Because you are carrying my grandchild, Elena said simply. And because I made the mistake once before of staying out of something I should have stepped into. Her eyes dropped briefly. Dominic's father made an agreement very similar to this one. With different men, different terms, but the same principle, a human being as currency. I stayed quiet because I told myself it wasn't my place. She looked up. The person that agreement was made about has spent the last 20 years paying the price. I am not doing that again. The weight of what she wasn't saying sat heavily in the space between them. Sophia thought of the photograph she'd found in the conference room, the young woman with the familiar eyes. She thought of Dominic saying, I'm not my father. She thought of the way he'd said it, like a promise he'd been making to himself for years. The woman in the photograph, Sophia said, in the conference room. Dark hair, sharp eyes. Who is she? Elena went very still. You saw that. I moved it. I didn't mean to look. A long silence. Then her name is Isabella. She's Dominic's sister. A pause that cost her something. She's the one the agreement was made about. 22 years ago. She was 16. Elena's voice didn't break, but it came close to the edge of something. She's been out of the country for 11 years. She stays away because it's the only way she can stay safe. She met Sophia's eyes. Now, do you understand why I'm sitting here? Sophia understood. She understood so completely that she had to put both hands flat on the table and breathe through it. Because this wasn't just about her anymore. This wasn't just about a secret she'd been carrying and a complicated man and a pregnancy she hadn't planned. This was a pattern, a long, deliberate, generational pattern of powerful men treating the people they claimed to protect as assets to be managed and the women in their lives paying the cost. I need to talk to Dominic, she said. Yes, Elena said. You do, but Sophia, when you talk to him, you need to be prepared for the possibility that he already knows more than he's told you, and that he chose not to tell you for a reason he believes is justified. She reached across the table and placed one hand briefly over Sophia's. He is not a bad man, but he is a man who has been running damage control his entire life. He confuses protection with control because in his world, they have always been the same thing. Sophia looked at that hand on hers, then at Elena's face. Why didn't you call Dominic instead of me? Because he would have managed the conversation, Elena said. He would have thanked me and told me it was handled and made sure I never spoke to you directly. A small, sad, knowing smile. You needed to hear this without him in the room. Sophia drove back to the foundation office in a state of focused, burning clarity. She was not panicking. Panic was a luxury she couldn't afford right now. What she felt instead was the particular cold steadiness that came from having the full shape of a problem finally visible, ugly and large and real, but at least no longer hidden. She went to her desk. She pulled up her calendar. She found the slot where Dominic had a standing check-in with the foundation director every Thursday afternoon, and she sent him a message, 3 words. We need to talk. His response came in 4 minutes, my office. 6 o'clock. She spent the rest of the afternoon working. Filing, organizing, responding to emails, doing every piece of her job with exacting precision because it was the only way to keep her hands from shaking and her mind from running too far ahead. At 5:55, she shut her computer, picked up her bag, and drove to Castellano Manor. Dominic was already in his office when she arrived. He was standing at the window, not sitting, not behind the desk. And when she walked in, he turned and looked at her face, and something shifted in his expression immediately. He could read her. She was beginning to realize that about him, and he read people the way other men read balance sheets. You talk to her, he said, flat, not a question. Sophia closed the door. Your mother called me. I know, I found out an hour ago. He moved away from the window. What did she tell you? Victor Ruiz, the agreement. Isabella. She watched his face. Start with whichever one you want to explain. The silence lasted 5 seconds. Long enough to tell her everything she needed to know about whether Elena had been telling the truth. Then Dominic pulled out the chair in front of his desk, not his chair, her chair, the guest chair, and said, Sit down. I told you before, please, he said, and the please was so unexpected, so stripped of the usual armor that she sat. He stayed standing. The agreement with Ruiz was made under duress. 3 years ago, I was in a position where I needed his cooperation, or 3 people I was responsible for would have been killed. It was not a choice I made lightly, and it is not one I have stopped trying to undo. He met her eyes. When I found out you were pregnant, my first call was to my attorney, not to Ruiz, to find out how quickly I could dissolve the agreement before it became relevant. How quickly, she asked. It's complicated. How quickly? Weeks, possibly months. He held her gaze. I am working on it every day. I did not tell you because I did not want you to be frightened before I had a solution. Dominic. She said his name, his first name, for the first time. His jaw tightened slightly. I am already frightened. I have been frightened for 4 months. Being frightened while uninformed is worse than being frightened with the actual facts. Do you understand that, He was quiet for a moment. Then yes. Tell me about Ruiz's surveillance. Your mother said his people have been watching me since before I started at the foundation. Since the day after I found the test. His voice was controlled, but something underneath it wasn't. He has a source in this house. Someone who told him about the pregnancy within 24 hours of me knowing. I am still identifying who. A source in his house. Sophia thought of Marco, his easy smiles, his too careful observations, the way he always seemed to be present at exactly the right moments. Marco Vasquez, she said. Dominic's eyes sharpened. What makes you say that? The day I started at the foundation, he came in. He knew exactly how to speak to me, not threatening, just informational. Reminders that he had information. And he said something. She kept her voice even. He said the things you protect tend to become things you own. He was testing whether I was scared enough to reach out to someone, creating a channel. Dominic looked at her for a long moment. Then he walked to his desk, picked up his phone, and made a call. 1 sentence, pull Vasquez's access, all of it, tonight. He ended the call and set the phone down. He's been with me for 9 years. I know, she said. I'm sorry. Don't be. His voice was still controlled, but there was something rough under it now. Something real. You were right, I should have seen it. He sat down on the edge of the desk, not behind it, but on the edge of it, and the shift was small, but it mattered. It was the difference between formal and human. Sophia, I need you to move. Move. Out of your apartment. Ruiz's people know where you live. If Marco is confirmed as the source, they know your routine, your schedule, your mother's address in San Antonio. His voice was direct, not gentle, but not cold. I have a property 15 minutes from the foundation office. Fully staffed, full security. I want you there. You want me in another house you own, she said. Yes. So you can protect me? Yes. Dominic, she leaned forward. I hear you, I understand the threat is real, but you keep making decisions about my life and then presenting them to me as the only logical option. And every time I walk further into your world, I lose another degree of my own. She held his gaze. I need you to stop deciding and start asking. He looked at her, really looked at her in the way that she had started to recognize meant he was recalibrating something, adjusting to her the way he was not used to having to adjust to people. Will you please, he said carefully, consider moving to the property on Meridian Street, temporarily while I close the gap on the agreement, and while I identify whether Marco has given Ruiz anything beyond your location. What else might Marco have given him? Medical records, appointment schedules, a pause. Names. Her stomach dropped. My mother. I have someone driving to San Antonio tonight, he said. Your mother will be in a secure location by morning. She won't be alarmed. It will be presented as a temporary relocation while her building undergoes maintenance. He held up a hand before she could speak. I know. I did that without asking. I made that call the moment my mother told me she'd spoken to you because time mattered more than the conversation. I will ask forgiveness later. Sophia looked at him. This man who moved through the world like a chess grandmaster, always 3 moves ahead, always managing and positioning and deciding, and who was looking at her right now with something in his face she hadn't seen there before. Not uncertainty exactly, but the awareness of it. The awareness that she was a variable he couldn't fully predict, and that this somehow mattered to him. Is my mother safe right now? She asked. My driver left 2 hours ago. And you were going to tell me this when I saw your face walk through that door, I was going to tell you immediately. He paused. I mean that. She believed him. That was the most complicated part of all of it. She kept believing him, and she didn't know if that was instinct or foolishness or something in between. Meridian Street, she said. I want to see it first. And I want my own key, my own car in the garage, my own schedule. I'm not a guest in your house. I'm not a woman you have installed somewhere safe and forgotten about. You will never, Toinso, he said quietly, be forgotten about. The way he said it stopped her. Not dramatic, not performative, just direct and true in the way very few things in this conversation had been simply cleanly true. She stood, picked up her bag. I need to go home and pack, whatever I need for 2 weeks. She moved toward the door and then stopped. Dominic, Isabella, where is she? His shoulders shifted just slightly. Switzerland. Is she safe? For now. When this is over, when you dissolve the agreement, is she coming home? He was quiet long enough that the quiet became its own answer. That's her choice, he said. It always should have been. Sophia nodded. She opened the door. I'll be at Meridian Street by Thursday, she said, and I want daily updates on the agreement, not summaries, actual information, actual progress. Agreed, he said. She walked out. She made it all the way to the parking lot and into her car before she let out the breath she'd been holding, and it came out ragged and long, and she pressed her forehead against the steering wheel and just breathed. Her phone buzzed. Carmen. I've been calling you for 3 hours. What is happening? I need you to listen, Sophia said. All of it. Don't interrupt until I'm done. She talked for 20 minutes. By the end, Carmen was so quiet, Sophia had to check the line was still connected. Carmen, I'm here. A long exhale. Sophia, what are you going to do? I'm going to move to Meridian Street, she said. I'm going to sound close enough to watch what he does, not just what he says. I'm going to keep showing up at that foundation office and doing my job, and I'm going to make sure that every decision about me and this baby from here forward gets made with my full knowledge. She looked up through the windshield at the manor, its lights golden against the dark. And I'm going to find out who Isabella Castellano is, because whatever happened to her, I think it's the key to all of it, to who he is, to why he operates the way he does, to what this family actually looks like underneath all the protection and the power and the agreements made in rooms she was never allowed to walk into. And if you find out something you can't come back from, Sophia thought about the flutter she'd felt in the foundation office, that small, certain movement, her baby, her daughter she somehow knew, just knew the way you sometimes knew things you had no rational evidence for. Then I deal with it, she said, but I deal with it knowing the truth, not in the dark, not managed, not protected from information like I'm something fragile. Her voice steadied. I am 4.5 months pregnant. I am working in the charitable foundation of a man who runs a criminal empire. My mother is being relocated by a driver I've never met, and the father of my child just confirmed there is an organized crime figure who considers my baby a bargaining chip. She paused. I am way past fragile, Carmen. Carmen was quiet for a moment. Then, what do you need from me? Find out everything you can about Victor Ruiz. Publicly available stuff, only don't do anything that puts you at risk. News business records, anything that shows the shape of him. Okay. And Carmen, she hesitated. Thank you for not telling me to run. You wouldn't have anyway. No, Sophia agreed. I wouldn't. She started the car. She drove home. She pulled out a suitcase and started packing with the same methodical efficiency she'd once used to fold towels and change sheets in a house she'd thought she was invisible in. Her hands were steady. Her mind was clear. And somewhere underneath all of it, beneath the fear and the clarity, in the sheer complicated weight of everything she was walking toward, was a feeling she hadn't expected and couldn't quite name. It felt something like resolve. It felt like finally, after months of reacting and hiding and surviving, she was about to start choosing. She zipped the suitcase. She looked at herself in the mirror above her dresser. 4.5 months along, barely showing yet, standing in an apartment she'd be leaving by Thursday with a suitcase and a plan and an enemy she hadn't known existed a week ago. She thought about what Elena had said. He confuses protection with control, because in his world they have always been the same thing. She thought about what she was going to prove to him day by day, meeting by meeting, decision by decision, that they weren't. That protection without consent was just a quieter kind of cage, and that she and the daughter she was carrying would not live in any cage, gilded or otherwise. Not without a fight. Sophia had been at Meridian Street for 6 days when she found the file. She hadn't been looking for it. That was the thing she would come back to later. She hadn't been snooping, hadn't been digging, hadn't done anything except open the wrong drawer in the home office looking for a stapler. The file was sitting right there, manila unlabeled, and she almost closed the drawer without touching it. Almost. She opened it. Inside were photographs, 8 of them printed on plain paper, the kind of things someone had assembled quickly from surveillance footage. The photographs were of her, taken over the span of at least 3 months at the grocery store, at Carmen's apartment building, at the clinic where she'd had her first prenatal appointment. The appointment she had told no one about except Carmen. She stood in the home office with the file in her hands and felt a particular cold that came not from fear, but from the confirmation of fear, the moment when the thing you suspected stops being a suspicion and becomes a fact you have to live with. These were Ruiz's photographs. Dominic had them, which meant Dominic had intercepted them, which meant this had been going on longer and been more organized than anything he had told her. She put the file back, closed the drawer, walked to the kitchen, poured herself a glass of water, and stood at the sink, drinking it slowly while she decided what she was going to do next. By the time she set the glass down, she had decided. She picked up her phone and called Dominic. He picked up on the second ring. Sophia, when were you going to tell me about the photographs? Silence, 2 seconds, 3, long enough to confirm he knew exactly what she was referring to. Where did you find them? Home office, wrong drawer. She kept her voice even. How long has Ruiz had someone following me? Since before you started at the foundation. His voice was careful, controlled. Since approximately 3 weeks after the night in the library. She closed her eyes. He's been following me since I was 6 weeks pregnant. Yes. And you've known since when? Since the night I found the test. A pause. The surveillance was the reason I opened the East Wing. I needed you in a location I could see so I could identify Ruiz's people before they got close enough to be a problem. The thing she had wondered about on that first morning, why he had opened the East Wing, answered finally in a way that made the whole sequence rearrange itself in her mind. Every move he had made from that day forward had been 1 step ahead of Ruiz and 2 steps ahead of her. You used me, she said, to flush out his surveillance. No, his voice sharpened slightly the first time she had heard something urgent under the control. I moved you into a position where I could protect you. There's a difference. From where I'm standing, there isn't. Sophia, I'm not finished. She set the glass in the sink. I want to see everything. Not the version you've decided I can handle. Everything, every photograph, every report, every piece of information you have about Ruiz's operation and what it means for this baby. Tonight, if you can't do that, I'll find someone who will. A pause. What does that mean? It means I spoke to a federal attorney 2 days ago, she said. Someone Carmen knew. Privately, nothing filed. Just a conversation about what protections might be available to someone in a situation like mine. She waited. I wanted options, Dominic, because you keep being my only option, and I don't think that's healthy for either of us. The silence on the other end was the longest yet. When he spoke, something in his voice had shifted, not broken but bent, like a wall that had taken a hit and was deciding whether to hold. You talked to a federal attorney. Yes. Without telling me. You're not my guardian. You're the father of my child. Those are different things. She heard her own voice come out clear and grounded, and she was glad of it. Tonight, everything, yes or no? Yes, he said. Come to the manor at 7. She arrived at 6:58. Dominic met her at the front door himself, us, not Marta, not any staff member. Just him in a dark shirt, looking like a man who had spent the day dismantling something carefully and hadn't finished yet. He led her to the study, not the East Wing office, and on the desk was a folder 3 times the thickness of the one she'd found in the drawer. Sit down, he said, and then before she could respond, please. She sat. He sat across from her, not behind the desk, but beside it, pulling his chair around so there was no furniture between them. And that gesture, small, deliberate, did something to the temperature of her anger. Not extinguished it, just adjusted it. Start from the beginning, she said. He did. Victor Ruiz had come up through the same channels as Dominic's father, a network of men who had built their power in the space between legitimate business and the kind of agreements that never appeared in writing. When Dominic had taken over at 32 after his father's death, he had inherited both the empire and its obligations. Ruiz had been one of the most significant. The agreement about the firstborn heir had been presented not as a negotiation, but as an existing condition, something his father had already committed 2 years before Dominic knew it existed. I found out the year I took over, Dominic said. My attorney found it buried in a set of private agreements my father had signed, 18 months before he died. His voice stayed even, but his jaw was tight. I have been trying to dissolve it since the day I found out it existed. Ruiz has blocked every legal avenue. He's been waiting. Waiting for what? For me to have a child. He met her eyes. The agreement only becomes enforceable when there is a firstborn. Before that, it's just language on a page. He paused. You understand what I'm telling you? She understood. The pregnancy wasn't just complicated by the agreement in a specific terrible way. The pregnancy was what had activated it, what had turned a theoretical problem into an immediate one. He's not going to touch my daughter, she said. No, Dominic said, and the word came out with a weight that was not a promise so much as a declaration of war. He is not. How close are you to dissolving it? 2 weeks, maybe less. He opened the thick folder and turned it toward her. My attorney has been building a case that the original agreement was coerced, that my father signed under duress, which is documentable. If we can get it in front of the right arbitrator before Ruiz moves formally, it's gone. Legally, completely, permanently gone. Sophia looked at the documents, at the dates, the signatures, the dense legal language. She was not a lawyer, but she was a woman who had spent years in administrative work, and she knew how to read the structure of a document, the shape of an argument. She turned pages slowly, and Dominic was quiet while she did it, and that his willingness to wait to give her time to not manage the silence mattered more than any single thing he'd said. "Marco," she said, not looking up. "Has he confirmed Ruiz?" Yes, he was feeding Ruiz location information. Not medical records, he didn't have access to those. But enough. A pause. He's been removed from all properties and all access. He's aware that his cooperation in identifying what he passed will determine what happens next. Is he cooperating? Enthusiastically? Dominic said in a tone that made it very clear that Marco's enthusiasm had been strongly encouraged. Sophia turned the last page, closed the folder, looked at Dominic. "Your mother told me Isabella has been out of the country for 11 years. Something moved across his face. "Yes. The agreement your father made about her, the same structure as mine. Similar enough?" He looked at the desk. "She was 16 when he signed it. She didn't find out until she was 19. By then she had two options: stay and fight a battle she was likely to lose, or leave and build a life somewhere the agreement couldn't reach her practically, even if it could reach her legally." He was quiet for a moment. "She chose to leave. I can't say she was wrong. Does she know about me?" "About the baby? My mother told her 2 days ago." He paused. "She called me." Sophia looked up. "What did she say?" "She said—" He stopped, started again. "She said if I handled this the way our father would have handled it, she would never speak to me again." His eyes came up to hers, and then she said she was watching and she believed I could do better. A beat. "She also said that if you ever wanted to talk to someone who understood the experience from the inside, she was available." Sophia felt something shift in her chest. Isabella Castellano, a woman she'd never met, living in exile, 11 years old, watching her brother from a distance, and still somehow extending a hand to a stranger carrying his child. "I'd like that," Sophia said, "to talk to her. I'll give you her number." She nodded. Then she looked at the folder again. At everything laid out in front of her, the surveillance photographs, the legal documents, the 2-week timeline. At the shape of the problem finally fully visible. "What do you need from me for the next 2 weeks?" she asked. Dominic seemed to not have expected that question. Something shifted in his expression, a crack in the management brief and reel. "Stay at Meridian Street. Keep your routine at the foundation consistent. Ruiz is less likely to move if it looks like nothing has changed. And Payan," he paused, "let me know if anything feels wrong. Don't assess it first. Don't decide if it's significant enough to mention. Just tell me." "That goes both ways," she said. "Every update on the arbitration, every development with Ruiz, not summaries, not the version you think I can handle." Agreed. She stood to go. And then the thing she hadn't said all evening, the thing she'd been carrying underneath, all the strategy and the documents and the direct conversation came out without warning, because she was tired and it was late and she was 6 months from delivering a child in the middle of a war she hadn't volunteered for. "Were you ever going to tell me," she asked, "about the agreement, if I hadn't found the photographs, if your mother hadn't called me?" She looked at him. "Were you going to solve it first and then tell me afterward when it was done so I'd never have to be frightened?" He held her gaze for a long moment and then he said yes. One word. Honest. And it hit harder than a denial would have, because it confirmed everything Elena had said about the confusion of protection and control, and it confirmed also that he knew it was wrong, knew it, and had done it anyway because the instinct to shield the people he cared about was stronger than his ability to recognize what that cost them. "I know," he said before she could respond. "I know what that tells you about how I operate. I know it's not—" He stopped. "I'm trying to do this differently. I don't always know what differently looks like." "It looks like this," she said. "This conversation, documents on the table, no managed version, no strategic timing." She picked up her bag. "That's what it looks like." She was at the door when he said her name. She turned. "The child," he said. "Our daughter." And the word daughter in his voice, he'd said it like he knew too. The same knowing she'd had, the same inexplicable certainty made her breath catch. "I want to be there. For the appointments, for whatever comes next. Not managing it. Just there." He paused. "If you'll allow that." She looked at him for a long moment. This man who had spent his entire adult life at the center of something dark, trying by his own measure to be better than what made him, and failing in the specific way that men who confused love with control always failed in trying again. She thought about what Elena had said. She thought about Isabella building a life in Switzerland. She thought about the flutter she'd felt in the foundation office, that small, certain movement. "We'll figure it out," she said. Not yes, not no. The honest answer, which was that she didn't know yet, and she wasn't going to pretend she did. She drove back to Meridian Street. She called Carmen. Carmen answered on the first ring. "How did it go?" "He confirmed everything your attorney contact told us. The agreement, the surveillance, all of it." She pulled into the garage. "He says 2 weeks to dissolve it through arbitration. Do you believe him?" "I believe he's trying." She sat in the car for a moment. "I believe the situation is real and the threat is real, and he's working it as fast as he can. Whether that's enough," she stopped. "I don't know yet. And you two, whatever you two are, I don't know that either." Carmen made a sound that was not quite a laugh. "You know what I think? I think you went in there to stay angry, and you came out with documents and an invitation to meet his sister, and some tiny piece of you that was terrified of him is less terrified now." Sophia didn't answer for a moment. Then, "He said he wanted to be there, for the appointments, for the birth." "What did you say?" "I said we'd figure it out." "That's not no." "No," Sophia agreed, "it's not." She went inside. She made tea she didn't drink. She sat on the bed and called the number Dominic had texted her 40 minutes after she left the manor. Isabella's number, a Swiss country code sent without comment. She didn't expect anyone to pick up. It was late in Europe, later still, wherever in Switzerland Isabella actually was, and she was calling a stranger with whom she shared only the accident of loving the same complicated man, one as a sister, one as something she still didn't have a clean word for. The call connected on the third ring. "Sophia," Isabella's voice was low-accented slightly, with an undertone of warmth that reminded her painfully precisely of Dominic's voice when he forgot to be careful. "I hoped you'd call." "I'm sorry it's late," Sophia said. Don't be, I've been waiting." A pause. "How are you? How is the baby?" "We're both fine, considering." "Yes," a quiet sound, not quite a laugh. "Considering." A beat. "He told you about me." "Your mother did first," he confirmed. "Of course." Another beat. "Sophia, I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear it not as a warning, but as I suppose as information from someone who has spent 11 years with a very clear view of my brother from a distance." She paused. "He is the most protective and most infuriating person I have ever known. He will make decisions for you before you finish your sentence. He will decide what you need to know before you've asked. He will surround you with security and resources and attention, and you will feel simultaneously the safest and the most trapped you have ever felt." A beat. "And he will not understand why until someone makes him understand." Repeatedly, with great specificity. "I've been working on that," Sophia said. "Good," Isabella's voice warmed further. "Don't stop. Can I ask you something? Anything. Do you regret leaving?" The pause was long, the kind of pause that held a whole life inside it. "Every day," Isabella said finally, "and not at all. Both are true at the same time." She paused. "What I regret is that I had to choose. What I don't regret is that I chose survival." A beat. "Your daughter will not have to make that choice, not if Dominic can help it. And from what our mother tells me, not if you can help it either." "No," Sophia said, "she won't." They talked for 40 minutes. About Switzerland, about the foundation, about what it was like to be on the edge of a world like the Castellano world without being inside it. By the end, Sophia felt something she had not felt in months, the specific warmth of being understood by someone who had walked ground adjacent to your own. "Thank you," she said before she ended the call, "for picking up." "Thank you for calling," Isabella said. "Take care of yourself, both of you." A pause. "And Sophia, when this is over, when Dominic dissolves the agreement and Ruiz is no longer a threat, make him earn it. Whatever comes next between you, make him earn it properly. He knows how. He's just never had a reason to try before." Sophia lay back on the bed after the call ended and looked at the ceiling and thought about what earning it properly looked like. about what she wanted, not what was safest, not what was most strategic, but what she actually wanted underneath all the fear and the practicality and the survival mode she'd been operating in for the better part of 5 months. She put her hand on her stomach. The baby moved immediately strongly, like she was making a point. "I know," Sophia said aloud quietly to her daughter, and to the room and to no one. "I know." 4 days later, everything changed. She was at her desk in the foundation office at 2 in the afternoon when Dominic called. Not a text, a call. She knew before she picked up that something had moved. "Ruiz filed," Dominic said. The moment she answered, no preamble, her hand tightened on the phone. "What does that mean?" "It means he didn't wait for arbitration. He's moved to formalize the agreement through his own legal channels. Private, not public, but formal." A pause. "My attorney says we have 72 hours to counterfile before his claim gains standing." 72 hours. Yes. And the arbitration case, the coercion argument, still viable. We're filing it simultaneously. His voice was controlled, but underneath it was something coiled tight. "There is one more thing. Tell me, Ruiz has requested a meeting with me and with you. A beat. He knows you're aware of the agreement. Marco told him you'd been brought in. He wants to, in his words, meet the mother of the child before legal proceedings make the situation adversarial." Sophia stared at the wall in front of her desk. "He wants to meet me." "Yes. And you think I should?" "I think," Dominic said carefully, "that you should decide, not me." She almost said no. The word was right there, simple and clean and safe. Then she thought about Isabella choosing to leave instead of fight. She thought about Elena staying quiet instead of speaking. She thought about all the women in this story who had made the careful choice, the protected choice, the choice that kept them out of the room. "Set the meeting," she said. Silence. "Sophia, I am the mother of your child. I am the woman Ruiz is using as a bargaining piece, and I am done being discussed in rooms I'm not in." She heard her own voice steady, certain, finished with fear. "Set the meeting. I'll be there." Whatever Dominic said next, she didn't hear it clearly, because in that moment, sitting at her desk in the foundation office, that had started as a gilded compromise and become something closer to solid ground. She felt her daughter move again, sharp, insistent, unmistakable. And she understood with absolute clarity what the next 72 hours were going to cost her, and decided without hesitation that she was going to pay it. The meeting with Victor Ruiz was set for Thursday at noon, which gave Sophia exactly 51 hours to prepare for the most important conversation of her life. She spent the first night not sleeping, not pacing either, just lying on her back at Meridian Street with her hands flat on her stomach and her eyes open in the dark, running through every possible version of how Thursday could go. She was 6 months pregnant. She was walking into a room with a man who had spent 3 years treating her unborn daughter as a contractual asset. She was doing it voluntarily. She was doing it because the alternative, waiting in a safe house while powerful men decided her future in rooms she wasn't allowed to enter, was no longer something she was capable of. By 3 in the morning, she had stopped rehearsing and started deciding. Not what she would say, what she would not allow. There was a difference, and it mattered. Dominic called at 7 the next morning. She was already up, already dressed, already on her second glass of water, because the nausea that had eased in the second trimester had come back with specific opinions about her anxiety levels. "I want to go over the terms," he said the moment she picked up. "Good morning to you too." A pause. "Good morning." And something in the small adjustment, the way he caught himself, made himself slow down, took the 2 seconds to be human, told her that he had also spent the night not sleeping. "Are you all right?" "I'm functional," she said. "What are the terms?" "The meeting is on neutral ground, a private room at the Hargrove Hotel booked under my attorney's firm. My attorney will be present. Ruiz is bringing one associate. No recording devices, no phones in the room. Standard." "Standard for what?" "For these kinds of meetings." "I want Carmen there," Sophia said. A beat. "Sophia?" "Not in the room, in the hotel, in the lobby, or a room nearby." She kept her voice even. "I'm not asking for a tactical advantage. I'm asking for the ability to walk out of that meeting and have someone I trust within 100 feet of me." He was quiet for a moment. "Done," he said. "I'll have a room booked for her adjacent to the meeting floor." "Thank you." She set her glass down. Tell me about Ruiz, not what the file says. What you know about him as a person. Another pause, this one thoughtful, not resistant. He is 71 years old. He built everything he has from a position of genuine poverty, which he will tell you about himself at length if you give him the opportunity. He believes in the old structures, agreements made between men honored across generations. He doesn't think of himself as a predator, a beat. He thinks of himself as a traditionalist, as someone preserving a way of operating that the modern world is trying to erase. Which makes him more dangerous, Sophia said. Then, not less. Yes, a pause. He will try to make you sympathetic to him. He is very good at it. I know, she said. I've dealt with men who are very good at making you feel like being reasonable means agreeing with them. She picked up her bag. I'll be at the foundation office until 11. I'll meet you at the Hargrove at 11:45. Sophia, his voice shifted. If at any point in that room you want to leave for any reason without explanation, you stand up and leave. I will handle whatever comes after. She almost said she didn't need the permission. Then she understood he wasn't giving her permission. He was telling her the exit was hers, that he would absorb the consequences so she didn't have to. That was the difference, and she felt it. I'll see you at 11:45, she said. She spent the morning at the foundation office doing actual work because the work grounded her and because Dr. Ewan had a grant deadline that needed the administrative coordinator to be present in a functional way. At 10:45, she filed the last document, shutting her computer, went to the bathroom, looked at herself in the mirror, and said very quietly and very clearly, "You are not a bargaining chip. You are not a variable. You are the mother of a child who deserves a clear world, and you are going to go into that room and make it clearer." Then she picked up her bag and walked out to her car. Carmen was already at the Hargrove when Sophia arrived, sitting in the lobby with a coffee she wasn't drinking and an expression that was trying very hard to be calm and not entirely succeeding. She stood when she saw Sophia, and they held each other for a moment without speaking, and that Carmen's arms, familiar and solid, did more for Sophia's nerves than any strategy session could have. "You don't have to do this," Carmen said against her hair. "I know," Sophia said. "That's why I'm doing it." Dominic was in the hallway outside the meeting room with his attorney, a composed woman in her 50s named Catherine Marsh, who had the particular calm of someone who had been in difficult rooms many times and had won more than she'd lost. Dominic looked at Sophia when she came off the elevator and did a quick involuntary assessment, the kind you couldn't train yourself out of when you cared about whether someone was all right. And then he nodded once, and she nodded back, and it was the most honest communication they'd had without words. "He's already inside," Catherine said. "He arrived early." "Of course he did," Sophia said. "Shall we?" Catherine opened the door. Victor Ruiz was not what she had built in her mind. She had constructed someone sharp-edged and cold, someone whose menace was visible in his posture. What she found instead was a man who looked like someone's grandfather. White-haired, heavy-set, with large hands folded on the table and eyes that were sharp inside a face that had been arranged very deliberately to appear harmless. His associate was younger, silent, positioned slightly behind and to the right, a witness, not a participant. Ruiz stood when they entered. He extended his hand to Sophia, first bypassing Dominic entirely, and the move was so deliberate that it was almost elegant, a statement that she was the reason for the meeting, not the man beside her. She shook his hand. Firm, brief, released immediately. "Miss Reyes," he said. His voice was low, warm, faintly accented. "Thank you for coming." "Mr. Ruiz," she said, and sat down. Dominic sat to her left, Catherine to her right. Ruiz settled back into his chair and looked at her with the attention of a man who had spent 70 years reading people across tables and had gotten very, very good at it. "You're not what I expected," he said. "I get that a lot," Sophia said. Something moved in his eyes, appreciation almost. "I imagine you have been told things about me that are not entirely favorable." "I've been told accurate things about you," she said. "I prefer accuracy to favorability." He smiled. "Then we are alike in at least one way." He unfolded his hands. "Let me be direct, Ms. Reyes, because I think you would prefer that to theater. The agreement I made with Dominic's father was made in good faith under the customs of our world. It was not made with malice. It was not made against you. It was made before you existed in this equation. It was made about a child who didn't exist yet, Sophia said. Which is worse, not better. A slight pause. Perhaps, he acknowledged, but the agreement exists. It is binding within the framework of our community, and I am here not to threaten, but to propose a resolution that does not require the ugliness of formal proceedings. What resolution? Dominic asked. First words he'd spoken since they'd sat down. Ruiz kept his eyes on Sophia. The agreement concerns alliance. Not the child herself, but what the child represents, a continuation of the Castellano name in a direction I can work with. He paused. What I am proposing is a renegotiation. The agreement modernized, no future obligation on the child. Instead, a formal acknowledgement from Dominic's operation that certain territories and business interests remain aligned for the next decade. The child's name is removed. The business relationship continues. Everyone moves forward. Sophia looked at him. She looked at the way he held his hands, at the careful reasonableness of every word, at the way he had engineered this entire conversation to make refusal seem like irrationality. You want to trade my daughter for a business deal, she said. I want to remove your daughter from the equation entirely, he said patiently, in exchange for a business arrangement between two organizations that already have a working relationship. Mr. Ruiz, she leaned forward very slightly. I appreciate the reframing. You've done it well. But what you're describing is still an exchange in which my child is the currency that initiates the negotiation. Without the child, you don't have leverage. Without the child, Dominic has no reason to agree to territorial alignments on your terms. The child is still the instrument, even if she's been removed from the final document. She held his gaze. I understand the structure. I've been understanding structures like this my entire professional life. The terms change. The mechanism doesn't. The room was very quiet. Ruiz looked at her for a long moment, and then he looked at Dominic. Something passed between them. Old layered the look of two men who had been circling each other for years, and then Ruiz looked back at Sophia and his expression had changed. The warmth was still there, but it had moved aside slightly to let something more genuine through. You are considerably more formidable than Dominic led me to believe, he said. Dominic didn't tell you anything about me, she said, which is why you underestimated me. A pause, then to Dominic, I see why you moved her into the foundation. She moved herself, Dominic said, quietly, factually. Ruiz was quiet for a moment. Then he said, what would you propose, Miss Reyes, since you understand the structure so clearly? And this was the moment, the one she had decided on at 3 a.m. with her hands on her stomach and the dark pressing in. Not the moment she'd rehearsed, she'd stopped rehearsing, and that had been the right call, but the moment she'd been building toward for 5 months, from the first positive test in the East Wing bathroom to sitting in this chair with 71 years of entrenched power looking at her across a hotel table. I propose you dissolve the agreement entirely, she said, in exchange for a single thing. And what is that? My testimony. She watched his face. To the federal attorney I spoke with last week. The meeting was informal. It doesn't have to stay that way. She paused. I have been surveilled for 5 months by your people. I have documentation, photographs, dates, locations. That constitutes a pattern that a federal attorney would find very interesting, particularly combined with documentation of the original agreement and its terms. She kept her voice even. Conversational, like she was discussing a grant deadline at the foundation office. Dissolve the agreement today in writing witnessed by both our legal representatives, and that conversation with the federal attorney stays informal and personal forever. A beat. And I walk out of this hotel and make a phone call. The silence that followed was the loudest thing Sophia had ever sat inside. Ruiz looked at her, at Dominic, at Catherine Marsh, who had the expression of a woman watching something she had not anticipated but was professionally equipped to process. Then back at Sophia. You came here to threaten me, he said. Not angry, almost impressed. I came here to give you an exit, she said. There's a difference. Another long silence. Then Ruiz turned to his associate the first time he'd acknowledged the man's presence, and something passed between them in a look. The associate gave a slight nod. Ruiz turned back. Catherine, he said, draft the dissolution. Catherine's pen was already moving. It took 40 minutes to draft, review, and sign, 40 minutes of careful language and Catherine's precision, and Ruiz's attorney called in from the lobby, where he'd been waiting, reading every line with the focused attention of a man who understood exactly what was being surrendered. Sophia sat through all of it without fidgeting, without looking at Dominic, without showing a single thing on her face beyond calm professional attention. When it was done, signed, witness dated, Ruiz stood. He looked at Sophia one final time with an expression that was complicated and real. "Your daughter," he said, "is going to be extraordinary." "Yeah," Sophia said, "she is." He left. His associate followed. The door closed and Sophia sat at the table with Dominic and Catherine in a room that felt suddenly very different from the one they'd walked into an hour ago. And for a long moment, nobody spoke. Then Catherine said, "I need to file this within the hour to make the counterclaim moot." She picked up the documents, gathered her things with efficient speed, and paused at the door. "Ms. Reyes, that was the most controlled negotiation I have witnessed in 22 years of practice." A pause. "Well done." And she was gone. Sophia and Dominic sat alone in the room. "The federal attorney," he said. "Was it a bluff?" She looked at him. "No." "You would have done it?" "Yes." He was quiet for a moment. "It would have pulled my entire operation into federal scrutiny." "I know. You were willing to do that." "Dominic," she turned to face him fully, "I was willing to do whatever it took to dissolve that agreement. Whatever it took. Not because I wanted to damage you or your business, but because my daughter does not come into this world as anyone's leverage. Not Ruiz's, not yours, not anyone's." She held his gaze. "I need you to understand that, really understand it. Because whatever happens between us from here, that is the foundation. She is free. She is not currency. She is not a continuation of anything. She is a person, and she is mine, and she comes first. Always." Dominic looked at her for a long moment. Something in his face did what she had been watching it almost do for weeks. It let go. Not of control, not of the composure he wore like a second skeleton, but of the distance. The managed strategic distance he kept between himself and the things he cared about most, because caring too much and showing it had always been a vulnerability he couldn't afford. "I know," he said. "I've known that since the night you walked into my office and told me the truth." He paused. "I'm not going to manage you, Sophia. I'm not going to manage her. I don't know how to stop doing it entirely. It's built into how I operate. But I'm asking you to keep telling me when I do it, the way you've been doing. Don't stop." "I won't," she said. "You can count on that." Something crossed his face that she recognized finally for what it was. It wasn't the controlled attention he gave everything. It wasn't the strategic warmth he used in professional settings. It was simpler than that and more terrifying in a man like him, precisely because of its simplicity. It was hope. The specific, cautious, barely allowed hope of someone who had spent a very long time believing that the people they cared about were safer at a distance. "What do you want?" he asked. "Not what's practical, not what makes sense given the situation. What do you actually want?" And nobody had asked her that in 5 months. Carmen had come close, but not quite. Isabella had gestured toward it. Elena had understood it without asking it directly. But the man who had the most power over the shape of her life, going forward, the man sitting 2 feet from her in a hotel meeting room with a signed dissolution on the table between them, had just asked her directly what she wanted. She thought about what Isabella had said. Make him earn it. He knows how. He's just never had a reason to try before. "I want my daughter to grow up knowing who she is," Sophia said. "Not who her father is, not what her last name means in certain rooms, not what she represents to anyone. Who she is." She paused. "I want her to have both of us, if we can manage it without burning each other down. I want what's between you and me to be honest and actually honest, not managed and curated and delivered on a schedule you think I can handle." She looked at him steadily. "And I want the foundation role to be a real position, not a way to keep me close, not charity. A real job with real responsibility where I earn every inch of what I have." "It already is," he said. "I know. I just needed to say it out loud." She stood, picked up her bag. "I'm going to go find Carmen before she actually breaks that coffee cup she's been strangling for the last hour." He stood too, and then he did something she had not expected from Dominic. Castellano, he moved around the table and stood in front of her, not blocking her way, not positioning her, just standing in front of her, close enough that she could see all the things his face was doing when he stopped managing it. "Thank you," he said, "for walking into that room, for not letting me be the only one in it." She looked at him. "That's what equals do," she said. She left. She walked down the hallway and Carmen was already coming off the elevator. Apparently the tension of waiting in a hotel room had exceeded Carmen's capacity at some point in the last 20 minutes. And when she saw Sophia's face, she stopped walking. "It's done," Carmen said. "It's done." Carmen closed the distance between them in 3 steps and grabbed both of Sophia's hands and looked at her face with the intensity of a woman who had been fielding phone calls and sitting in lobbies and not asking to be in rooms she wasn't invited into for 5 months purely out of love. "Are you okay?" "Yes," Sophia said, and meant it fully for the first time in a very long time. "I'm actually okay." They sat in the hotel lobby for an hour. They drank coffee that was too expensive and talked about everything and nothing: Carmen's job, Sophia's mother who had been returned home from her building maintenance relocation 3 days ago and had somehow managed to befriend 2 of Dominic's security staff in the process. The baby who Carmen wanted to know the name of immediately, and Sophia was not yet ready to share. "You've decided, though," Carmen said. "You have a name." "I have a name." "What in Dimpish? And when she's here and I'm holding her and the world is the shape it's supposed to be, I'll tell you." Sophia smiled, the real kind, the kind that came from somewhere below its strategy and exhaustion. "Not before." Carmen pointed at her. "You are impossible. You've been saying that since we were 19. It keeps being true." Sophia drove back to Meridian Street that evening, feeling the particular quiet of a problem that has been faced head-on and resolved not perfectly, not without cost, but genuinely resolved with nothing left in the dark. She called her mother from the driveway, her mother who knew the outline of things but not the details, who had asked precisely 3 targeted questions when Sophia had told her she was pregnant and had spent every conversation since making sure Sophia was eating enough and sleeping enough and not letting anyone push her around. "How are you feeling, baby?" her mother asked. "Tired," Sophia said. "Good tired. Good tired is the best kind." A pause. "And the situation, the thing you couldn't tell me about, handled." A long silence, then her mother said, "I knew you would." Just that. Simple, certain, the way her mother had always been certain about her in a way Sophia had never quite been certain about herself. "Come home soon, before the baby comes. I want to see you before everything changes." "Soon," Sophia promised. "A few more weeks." She went inside. She sat on the bed. She put both hands on her stomach and talked to her daughter the way she'd been doing since the 5th month, quietly, without self-consciousness, the running narration of a woman who needed someone to tell things to and had found the most unconditional audience imaginable. "It's done," she said. "The thing that was hanging over you, it's gone. You're free. Before you're even born, you're already free." She paused. "Your father is complicated. You'll figure that out yourself on your own timeline, and I will never tell you what to think of him. But I will tell you that when it counted, when the room was hard and the stakes were real, he sat beside me instead of in front of me. That matters." Another pause. "And you're going to have a grandmother in Texas who will absolutely spoil you beyond recognition, and an aunt in Switzerland who already loves you from a distance, and a woman named Carmen who is going to be the most aggressively devoted godmother in recorded history, whether she knows that's the title yet or not." The baby moved, long rolling, unmistakable, like she was settling in. 3 weeks later, Isabella Castellano came home. She did not announce it. She appeared at the foundation office on a Tuesday morning, walked up to Sophia's desk, and stood there dark-haired, sharp-eyed, exactly the woman from the photograph, but warmer, more tired, more real, and said, "I wanted to meet you in person before the baby came." Sophia stood up. They looked at each other across the desk for a moment with the particular recognition of 2 women who had been in adjacent versions of the same story and had both in their different ways survived it. "You look like your brother," Sophia said. Isabella's mouth curved. "Everyone says that. He hates it." She looked at Sophia's stomach, 7 months now, unmistakable. "She's going to be beautiful." "She's going to be loud," Sophia said. I can already tell. Isabella laughed, a real one, the kind that changed her whole face. Good, this family needs loud. They had lunch. They talked for 2 hours and Dominic's name came up exactly 4 times, and each time it was handled the way you handled a complicated truth, directly, without drama, with the full acknowledgement that complicated did not mean wrong. Isabella told Sophia about Switzerland, about the life she'd built there, about the question she'd been carrying for 11 years of whether she would ever come back. What made you come back now? Sophia asked. Isabella considered the question seriously. You, she said, not in a dramatic way. Just when Dominic told me what happened in that meeting room. What you did, the way you did it. She paused. I realized that if you could walk into that room with Victor Rose and walk out having won, then maybe the ground had shifted enough that coming back was possible. She looked at her coffee cup. I've been waiting for the ground to shift for 11 years. I think it finally has. Your brother had something to do with that. He did, Isabella agreed. And so did you. She looked up. The things he protects tend to become things he owns. Marco told you that. Yes. Marco was right about the pattern. He was wrong about whether the pattern was permanent. She held Sophia's gaze. You changed the pattern. You made it unaccountable. She stopped. That's what I never had anyone to do for me. The weight of that sat between them for a moment, not heavy but real. You're here now, Sophia said. I'm here now, Isabella agreed. The baby came on a Thursday morning in the 8th month, early by 3 weeks fast and determined, arriving with the specific urgency of someone who had a point to make about waiting. Dominic was in the hospital. Not in the room, not unless Sophia asked, but in the hospital that had been the arrangement, and he held to it. Sophia asked at the end, when the world had narrowed to the essential, and she was tired in every cell and ready to stop being brave for 5 minutes. She asked, and he came in and stood where she could see him and didn't say anything, which was exactly right. When it was over, when the nurse placed her daughter in her arms for the first time, small, certain, already looking at the world like she was assessing it, Sophia looked at her and felt a particular unnameable feeling of a long journey arriving at the place it was always going. Dominic stood a few feet away, not crowding, not managing, just present. Do you want to hold her? Sophia asked. He crossed the room. He took his daughter with the careful, slightly uncertain hands of a man who was used to being competent and was finding an entirely new frontier of incompetence. And the look on his face when the baby turned her head toward him, instinctive, immediate, was the most unguarded thing Sophia had ever seen on a human face. Hi, he said very quietly. To his daughter, just that. Hi. The baby made a sound, decisive. Carmen, from the chair in the corner, where she had been stationed for 11 hours and was never going to let Sophia forget it, said very quietly, Oh, she's already running things. She comes by it honestly, Sophia said. Later, much later, after Carmen had been gently evicted and Dominic had returned his daughter to her mother and was sitting in the chair beside the bed in the kind of silence that didn't need to be filled, Sophia said the name. For the first time out loud to the people it needed to be said to. Lucia, she said. Her name is Lucia. Dominic was quiet for a moment. After your mother's mother. She looked at him. You knew my grandmother's name. I know a lot of things about you, he said. And then before she could respond, I know I'm not supposed to know most of them. And I know I used information in ways that weren't fair to you. And I'm going to spend a long time earning back the ground I didn't deserve to take. He met her eyes. I'm not asking for forgiveness tonight. I'm just telling you it's the work I intend to do. Sophia looked at her daughter Lucia, small and certain, and already entirely herself, and then at the man beside her who was not her enemy, and not her savior, and not her story, but was undeniably and irrevocably part of her life. Then do the work, she said. I'll be watching. Outside the window, the city moved through its ordinary Thursday cars and voices, and the sound of the world not knowing or caring that something had shifted inside one hospital room. But it had shifted. The agreement was gone, dissolved and filed and finished. The surveillance was over. Marco was gone. Ruiz had taken his exit and used it. Isabella was home sleeping in her childhood bedroom for the first time in 11 years, in a house that was beginning slowly to mean something different than it had before. And Sophia Reyes, who had walked into a stranger's mansion with a cleaning cart, in a secret, in a terror she'd carried alone for 4 months, who had sat across from dangerous men and told the truth and refused to be managed, who had built solid ground out of the wreckage of the situation she'd been handed, held her daughter and felt with total clarity that the woman she was in this moment was not the woman who had stood in the East Wing bathroom staring at two lines and thinking he can never know. She was someone who knew her own power, who had proven it in rooms where the stakes were real, who had walked into every hard conversation with her eyes open and come out the other side standing. Lucia yawned. Honey, enormous, absolute. Sophia laughed, the real kind, the kind that came from the very bottom of everything. The story didn't end because the danger was gone. It began because Sophia Reyes had decided at every single crossroads to stay on her feet, and nothing, not power, not fear, not love, not even the most dangerous man she had ever met, had been able to change that. She had always been the one holding the door open. She had finally walked all the way through it,